Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Just Sayin Podcast. This is episode 28. So, for those that listen to every single episode, obviously we skipped over episode 27. There was an episode 27, but Zoom, the platform that we record this on, did kind of failed on my download. So, therefore, me and Jake had an episode 27 amongst one another, but you guys didn't hear it. But thankfully, we were previewing the worst week of college football all season. Hopefully that won't go out on us anymore throughout the rest of the year, because from here on out, it is nothing but fireworks, Jake. And I know the Georgia Bulldogs had a great weekend, as did the Alabama Crimson Tide. But the road is not easy ahead. And in a couple of weeks, both teams will show down in what I think will be the national championship of the season. Currently, I think that might be the best game we see all season. Kind of like the 2012 SEC championship between Alabama and Georgia. Obviously, Bama barely won there towards the end and then went on to kill Notre Dame in the
Whoever won that game was going to win the national championship.
Yes, so. And I think that might be what we see in a couple of weeks, but that is conversation for 2 weeks down the road. So, Jake, I want to start off this conversation with your Georgia Bulldogs, obviously putting a stamp on the Tennessee Volunteers in Knoxville. I know you were on hand to witness it you were at a tailgate down at the game, but give me your overall impressions of the Georgia Bulldogs this past weekend, taking a dub over Dolly Parton and the Tennessee Volunteers, 38-10 in Knoxville, Week 12.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to take away, but I mean, it's just Georgia being consistent now. Both. It's the reason why Georgia Bama it potentially is the national championship. Whoever wins the natty, because both teams are peaking right now. Georgia looks really, really good. Bama looks really, really good, and that's going to be a dogfight. So it's going to be a great game. But I mean, dude, the story of our season, just third downs dominant on both sides of the ball. We were 9 for 13. Tennessee was 2 for 11. They were trash on third downs. We were great. Carson Beck, I said it before the show, he is absolutely surgical. He looks so good. And if he stays another year, I think he will be the first quarterback taken out off the board next year. I told you at the beginning of the year, he could potentially be a first-round pick, and he's showing it now. It's what I said. And so, I mean, our tailgate was probably about, I don't know, let's just say 3/4 of a mile from the stadium. That place was rocking. We heard it, and I'm pretty sure this could be a bad stat. But according to Saturday Down South, I think that's the article's name, the publisher's name, that was the loudest any college football stadium has ever been. They said it reached 137 decibels, which I don't know if I believe. It is what it is, but I can tell you it was loud, and Georgia was not fazed. We had one false start. How many penalties do we have all day? We had 2 penalties, a false start and a holding. So we looked absolutely dominant. Going on the road in that hostile environment, like I said, the most raucous Kirby's ever been in. And we look great outside of their first drive, their first play for 75 yards down the gash. CJ Allen looked like a freshman on that play. After that, they had 202 yards for the rest of the game. They averaged 3.7 yards per play, not per carry, not per attempt, per play. They averaged 3.7 yards. So it was just absolutely dominant. And this is what I love out of our wide receivers. We're never going to get the hype that, and for good reason, but we're never going to get the hype that LSU, Ohio State, Bama used to get, just all these wide receiver use. But we have so many receivers, and when you have Ladd go down again with an ankle injury and doesn't really play, when you have Ra Thomas go down with another ankle injury and he doesn't play all game, and Dominic Lovett only has 1 catch for 9 yards, those have been our most 3 consistent receivers, aside from Brock, of course, who's now getting back. But when we have those 3 guys not play tremendously well, we have 2 other guys step up. MRJ Rojak had, I think, 7 catches for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dylan Bell, it was the Dylan Bell game. He was doing everything, had 5 catches for 90 yards with a touchdown. Combined, they had over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And those are guys no one ever talks about, but I mean, they're good. And so that our receiver core is so deep, and especially with Brock back, I mean, it just poses so many threats. And our O-line continues to play extremely well. They better win the Joe Moore Award. If they give it to Michigan for a third year in a row and we get snubbed for the third year in a row, I will be livid. Because I don't care about any other award, but they deserve that because we go 7-8 deep, and they're just so good. And so defensively, I don't think Joe Milton played that horrible of a game. We were watching, and of course he missed throws. He's Joe Milton. He's going to do that. But I say this every week, Kamari Laster was absolute straps. Joe Milton dropped it in a bucket on like a 45-yard throw, and Kamari almost took it out of the receiver's hands. I mean, he was there stride for stride, had the ball in his eyes. He was just absolute straps. But Joe Milton didn't play all that bad. I just think we played really well. Michael Williams is peaking at the right time again. He took over a whole drive by himself, had a TFL for like 4 yards, and then had a batted down pass on what would have been a converted first down. Then also had like a 10-yard sack. He had a really good game. And then also Tyke Smith had an absolute great game from him as well. And then just an injury update. Tate Ratledge, our starting right guard, went down in the middle of the game. He left, didn't return. But what Kirby has said is that he just bumped knees and he should be fine. He could have returned if he had to. Robert Thomas, apparently it's a bone bruise, which I don't really know what that means. I don't know how long he's out for, but Kirby was optimistic about it. So I assume he'll be back by Bama comes around. And Ladd was on the field a little bit for Tennessee. He was very ginger on his foot. So I assume he might get one, maybe 2 catches against Georgia Tech, and then we'll be full to go against Bama. So, I mean, we're peaking at the right time. We're getting healthy. I mean, I anticipate only one guy being out for the Bama game, and that's Jamon Dumas-Johnson, maybe Julian Humphrey. But outside of that, we're healthy and we're looking good. So I'm excited to see how we finish off the season and go beat these nerds by 50.
Yeah, well, I definitely think when you're talking about the receiving core at Georgia, it's someone new every week. I mean, like you said, we had the Dylan Bell week, whether that was him throwing the football or catching the football. A lot of casual fans wouldn't know who he is. And I obviously, I don't watch every Georgia game, but I knew who he was before the game, but he just had his breakout moment of the season. We've seen it from MRJ this year. We've seen it from Ladd. Obviously, Brock has had several over his career. Oscar Delt filled in for the shoes of Brock. Ra Thomas has been there. Lovett, we're still waiting to see that real breakout game from him.
Well, Lovett's, I agree with the breakout, but he's been our second most consistent receiver. Down here. I want to say he had 70.
In terms of the hype he received coming out of Missouri, he hasn't had that one game. And I mean, I can say that all I want to about Dom Lovett, but Alabama's got plenty of guys that have not had breakout games that I thought, Malik Benson, for instance, I thought he was going to be the next Jameson Williams. He caught his first touchdown this past week of the season against UT Chattanooga, and he's a starter. So, I mean, good for him, but dude's been an absolute letdown this season for Alabama. But let's get back to Georgia. Like you said, the defense was strapped on third down. And I think that's where the game was won and lost, right? Not even just on offense, but on defense. Joe Milton, we know when this Tennessee team gets put in obvious passing downs, they are not going to succeed. And they didn't. And first off, I don't like the play calls from Heupel where they have Joe Milton just run the ball right at the middle. Like every time that happened, he would get maybe a yard or two. I was just wondering, what are we doing here? Because I'd much rather just hand the ball off to Sampson or Wright or one of those guys than have Joe Milton run the ball because he's not very fast. He may be physical, but he's going to get swarmed really quick by a really good defense like Georgia. It happened against Alabama as well. They had some success early on, but ended up being swarmed. So first off, I don't think the play calling from Heupel was great, but when they were put in those third down situations, it was tough for them to move the ball, and they got put in those situations too often. Now, I do think they ran the ball pretty well. When I watched the game, I thought they ran the ball, especially in the first half. Even if you throw away the 75-yard touchdown run, they were getting some yardage running the football. But where they throwing the ball was where they really lacked because it was either a dropped catch here and there from the Tennessee receiving core, or it was Joe Milton just throwing an absolute bad pass like we've seen him throw all year. So I thought the offense, obviously there's a lot left to be desired out there for Tennessee. It's not a great offense. We've seen it struggle a lot this year. I didn't think they played horrible given the situation, but Georgia's defense obviously just much better in this game. And then obviously, like you said, Carson Beck, I mean, dude's been a dog all season. I really cannot wait to see Alabama, Georgia, regardless of who wins and who loses. I think it's gonna be a great game. Two quarterbacks who have just considerably gotten better and better as the year's gone on, and then obviously can't wait to watch those matchups from the Georgia offense and the Bama defense. I mean, Brock Bowers up against whoever we decide to put him up against. Our secondary versus y'all's receivers, best on best. It's gonna be a fun game, Jake. But
So what I was going to say about the rushing is I didn't see that. And then I just ran down the stats, excluding the 70-yard play. They had 24 carries for 55 yards, which is an average of 2.2 yards per carry. They couldn't run the ball. I mean, they had a couple for 8, 10, 11, but most of them were going for 0, -1, 1, 2. They couldn't run the ball all game outside of that first play.
Well,
I mean,
a lot of that too is Georgia only had 1 sack in the game, and so that negates one carry of Joe Milton. But Joe Milton also had 4 carries for -13 yards. So you take out those stats from him, and I thought when I meant running game, I meant the running backs ran the ball a little bit better. But Joe Milton was awful, and that's what I was kind of getting at. Him running the ball was not a good look, and I think there was a lot. Even you take out the 75-yarder, I think they ran the ball okay, but they got away from it because they had to towards the end of the game. So maybe that was just two different perspectives going there. But from what I watched, I thought they did okay in the run game. But let's transition to just hit a few quick points on Alabama. Obviously, when we pay a team, we take care of business. 66-10 over UT Chattanooga at home. Paid them $600,000. Paid them $600,000.
All Alabama teams do that.
Yeah, apparently not. I will say this, and we'll talk about this game in a little bit. New Mexico State is not they're a pretty solid football team.
I agree.
Much better than UT Chattanooga, but you still need to take care of business at home when you pay a team that much money to play them. So, but Alabama 66-10, a lot of good things to take out of this game. Obviously, the play of the game didn't go Alabama's way. Ty Simpson, like a 71-yard carry, drops the ball on the 1-yard line right before he scores. Did you not see that?
I didn't see I see it.
It was all over. It was all over the Instagram. So he breaks away a carry of like 71 yards, like has a wide open touchdown, just drops the ball on the 1-yard line.
Was it he was celebrating too early?
He was celebrating, just dropped the ball on the 1-yard line. So we get the ball back, and we end up handing the ball off for a touchdown. But Nick Saban would not look Ty Simpson in the eyes, and it was really funny. But obviously saw what we wanted to see from the offense. Great performance. Jalen Milroe missed a couple throws, missed a deep throw, but hey, who gives a crap? It was against UT Chattanooga. When all the other plays mattered, he played really well. Jermaine Burton had a couple really good long catches. The running backs is what I thought was great. Jam Miller ran the ball great. Justice Haynes had a couple touchdowns. Richard Young had his first touchdown of the season. Jason Roydell both added touchdowns. So had a really good showing from the running backs, obviously against a terrible defense. And then defensively, Caleb Downs gave up a deep ball that ended up being a touchdown, but ended up having a really good game. So a lackluster performance there. Braswell had a targeting penalty, but he will be back for the Iron Bowl. Looking forward to that game next week. So a lot of really good things. A lot of guys who don't usually played in the game. I think one guy that really stood out to me was Keanu Coate, one of the backup edge rushers, number 19 there. He really disrupted the opposing offense when he was in the game. But I did feel bad for the UT Chattanooga quarterback. He was actually their backup quarterback, Jake. He made his first career start at Alabama. What a tough situation to walk in for that game. But definitely a memory maker for him. But that's really all we'll say about Alabama. In terms of injury updates, Deontay Lawson and Jalen Key both look to be good heading into the Auburn game. So should be back at full strength on defense. Milroe looked fine when he was running in the pocket, so that's obviously a promising sign. So looks like everyone that was questionable is going to be good. Still don't know anything about Ja'Cory Brooks. And then obviously last week in practice, Kobe Prentice actually hurt his hamstring, one of our reserve receivers who plays a lot. And he did not play in the game against UT Chattanooga, so he'll be questionable heading into the Auburn game, and I'm sure Ja'Cory Brooks will be as well. So two receivers, might be down two receivers against Auburn, but still should be okay. Let's turn to a game. Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. New Mexico State walks into Auburn, Alabama, walks into the Plains and beats the Auburn Tigers 31-10. Now, I didn't get to watch this game live, Jake, but I did listen to the Auburn Sports Radio on my drive home. And oh my goodness, it was one of the most hilarious things ever. I mean, I have never heard so many compliments about the New Mexico State Cowboys, about how good of a team they are and how much of a fluke this isn't for Auburn. You know, and now that I've been able to go back and watch the game, I feel so bad for Peyton Thorne. I mean, the dude really put it all out there. He was their best player on the field that night. Hugh Freeze talked about lack of effort, and it was evident. I mean, receivers at the top of their routes were not getting open against inferior athletes. I mean, this Auburn team, they were favored by 28.5, I think, going in this game, or 25.5 or something like that in the upper 20s, and they end up losing by 21. So, I mean, just inexcusable. Obviously, I mean, Nick Saban, his first career, lost to ULM, but he lost by like 4, I think. And Auburn fans are trying to make this comparison about Hugh Freeze and Nick Saban.
I saw you on Twitter.
I'm sorry, you don't get beat by 21 at home. No matter what year it is, you to a non-Power 5 team, a team that you paid $1.85 million to play. It's an inexcusable loss for them. And I think Hugh Freeze even said in his press conference yesterday that the loss is still looming large in the locker room and that players are still in the fog of what happened on Saturday. I don't know if that's just coach speak so that they can get their players ready for the Iron Bowl. Because we all know, especially as Alabama fans, and even as a Georgia fan, Auburn is going to give Alabama their best game. I mean, it's going to be a close game. I really do think. The line is 15 right now. There is no way I'm ever putting Alabama to cover a 15-point spread at Jordan-Hare. So Auburn's going to end up showing up next week. They may win. They may lose against Alabama. But, I mean, just what an embarrassing performance the week before the Iron Bowl. I mean, could not get look any worse, especially after beating Arkansas by 40 on the road.
I know the timing of it, everything it doesn't. If this loss happens their third game of the season, I think we kind of dismiss it. We make fun of them for a little bit, but it's bad that it happens now because you're about to go and play the Iron Bowl. I don't know how you get up for the Iron Bowl now. I have no clue. I don't know if they're going to be
spoil Alabama's season. That's really the only way, I think.
I can see Alabama going in and winning by 30 now. Without this loss, I knew it was going to be a close game. I've been saying it since earlier in the season. That was the game that scared me until this game because New Mexico State, I get it. They're a decent group of 5 team. They're a good group of 5 team.
Playing for their conference championship.
But when Auburn pays you $1.85 million to come and play in Jordan-Hare, and you are 25.5 point favorites and you lose by 21, because it's not like you got upset. Nick Saban got upset in his first year in 2007. Though that happens. Nickel State almost beat us in Kirby's first year. I mean, those things happen. A 21-point loss when you're 25-point favorites does not just happen, especially game 11 of the year about to go into the Iron Bowl. And this is class. I mean, they were definitely looking forward to playing Alabama and they just skipped over this game. They might have spent only 2 days practicing for them. But still, that just can't happen when you have so many superior athletes than New Mexico State. That is just extremely sad. And I don't know what's going to happen for the Iron Bowl now. No clue.
As an Alabama fan, I know I've seen this song and dance way too many times in my lifetime. I know Alabama.
This has never happened before. This has not happened.
Well, I know to this severity, you're exactly right. To this severity, they've never lost to a group of 5 team this bad. But I have seen Auburn lose a game before the Iron Bowl. You know, an Auburn team that's not very good, 5-6, whatever, 6-5. They're still going to give Alabama a game. They may lose the game. But I still think it's going to be a close game. Just because it's the Iron Bowl, just because it's being played at Jordan-Hare, it does not matter. Auburn will get up for the game because they can spoil Alabama's season and potentially, as a consequence, spoil Georgia. Because what if Auburn beats Alabama and then Alabama goes into the SEC championship game and beats Georgia? Then both of those teams are probably left out of the playoff. You know, barring any other crazy game. You know, and a team that could create some chaos this upcoming week, but just barely lost on the road this past week is Florida. Florida taking a 31-33 loss at the hands of Missouri in Columbia. I was able to watch the end of this game. Obviously, Graham Mertz going down is a huge injury for Florida, especially heading into this Florida State game, because I thought if they had Graham Mertz, especially now that Travis is out for the rest of the year, Florida was probably going to win that game. And I don't know much about their backup quarterback, Brown. Don't really know how good of a player he is. Don't really care, to be honest with you, because without Graham Mertz, I don't know. I can't believe I'm saying this. And if I was saying this at the beginning of the year, I probably would have laughed at myself. But Graham Mertz really makes this offense go for Florida.
That's
And
crazy. That's
he played a great game against Missouri. Missouri had they had a huge game the week before where they blew out Tennessee. So obviously kind of a letdown situation for them, but they were able to hang in there and win. And like we said, good teams always win at the end of the season. And Mevis drilled another field goal and another clutch spot for him. So good for Missouri, good for Eli Drinkwitz. They're staying really in the top 10 in the college football playoff. I do believe they're a top 10 team as well. We'll get to that later, but as for Florida, it's a must-win game next week to get bowl eligible for Billy Napier. Job could be on the line. I don't think so. I think they may give him another year, but it's not a good look when you coach when you're the University of Florida and you don't go bowl eligible. With all the talent that's on your roster, with all the talent and potential recruiting you can do in your home state, I mean, there's really no excuse that you shouldn't at least be a bowl team. I mean, guys have been fired from there for being 7 or 8 win coaches because they expect national championships at Florida, and Billy Napier has not even been close to even meeting expectations so far that he's been there. So he needs to get things turned around quickly. But maybe that starts next week, beating an undefeated Florida State team without their starting quarterback. Who knows? But I just don't see it now that Mertz is out.
And it doesn't get easier for them next year. They have them and Georgia have super hard schedules. I mean, because Georgia has to play Bama, Ole Miss, Texas, Clemson, and Auburn, if you include them. Florida has to go play Georgia, Ole Miss, LSU, FSU, Miami, and one other team. Anyway, super hard schedules. Oh, and Oklahoma. No, they have to play Texas as well. So super hard schedules for both of them. But it doesn't get easier. And so I was talking to my mom today because she's also a Florida fan, for those that don't know. But I was telling her how I thought Florida was going to upset FSU. And then when Jordan Travis got hurt, I was like, Florida is definitely upsetting FSU. And then Graham Mertz got hurt. And now I'm back to, I think Florida has a chance, but I think FSU is going to squeak by on a game-winning field goal or something like that. But Florida should have won this game. Florida, I don't know if it was Trevor, because I wasn't watching this. I was watching Washington, Oregon State. But I don't know if it was Montreal Johnson or Trevor Etienne, but one of them went out of bounds on a third down or second down, whenever it was, on the last drive in a crucial moment to give Missouri 40 more seconds to go score a field goal. So without that, Florida probably wins this game. But I mean, it's what we've been saying all season. Good teams find out how to win, whether you're playing the number 1 team or playing an unranked team at home. Missouri found a way to win. And, even if they weren't the better team on the field that day, they got the win in the win column, and they stay a top 10 team in my eyes and probably in the committee's eyes as well. So good for them. I want to talk about Michigan.
Hold on. One more thing on that. And I'm not in the ETN or Montreal Johnson, the running back situation there, but Missouri had a 4th and 20, 4th and 25. And Brady Cook found a wide open Luther Burden, who was like 30 yards downfield. How do you lose the biggest target for Missouri on the field in that situation? So there was just a lot of things that went wrong for Florida towards the end of that game. But yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I was trying to find out where do you run out of bounds at? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Michigan is scaring me because a few weeks ago, I was super confident they were going to beat Ohio State. That Ohio State offense, I don't want to say it was abysmal, but it wasn't good. But they're starting to get a little bit better. I'm not going to say Kyle McCord's good because he's not. But he can lead. He can be the national championship winning QB just because of how good Ohio State is around him.
Absolutely.
Michigan's like that. Michigan's offense is not very good. JJ McCarthy is not good. I thought he was really good at the beginning of the year, but I guess that's just because they were playing a Mickey Mouse schedule. I mean, people wanted to say that about Georgia, that they were playing no one. But then when we play 3 straight top 20, 2 straight top 10 teams, and we destroy them, except for Missouri, only beat them by 9, but still, when we play really well, I mean, that's what winners do. Michigan is doing the opposite. And I get Penn State's a good team, but their offense looked atrocious. I don't want to say they looked atrocious. They didn't look good. Defense looked really good. But then you go and play a not very good Maryland team. I get Maryland was hot in the beginning of the year, but they have been drastically slow ever since they started out, I think 4-0. They've been bad recently. And Maryland had a chance to win this game on the very last drive, and luckily Michigan's defense stepped up, but I don't know how this Michigan offense is going to move the ball against a really good Ohio State defense. I really have no clue. I think Ohio State's going to win that game. We'll talk about it in our next episode. I think Ohio State's going to win that game because Michigan, I mean, I get Blake Corum. You can run him through a brick wall. I mean, 28 carries for 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cool. I mean, that's not a great day. You got in the end zone twice. That's cool. But I mean, when JJ McCarthy doesn't throw for a touchdown pass for his third straight game and has another really bad interception, I just don't know. Because your defense is really good. It's a national championship winning defense. But if your offense can't put up any points, I mean, you're going to get these wins. You're going to beat a top 15 team in Penn State like that who can't move the ball. But when you have to go face, it can be anyone. You can say Washington. You can even say FSU with a backup QB, I think. If you play Oregon and obviously the Georgia, Alabama, I think if they played Missouri, they would lose right now. Michigan would. So I don't know. I'm super scared for that game if I was a Michigan fan because your offense does not look good.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a conference that has just horrible quarterback play. I mean, you've got guys in this conference like Marvin Harrison. I mean, just imagine what Alabama would be with a Marvin Harrison, or you add a Marvin Harrison to a Georgia roster that's already stacked, or Texas. I mean, this dude is one of the best college football players in recent memory, especially this year. I mean, I'd say he's probably a top 3 player in college football this year, alongside Caleb Williams and Brock Bowers. But and especially with JJ McCarthy too. I mean, he's got Roman Wilson, a really good receiver. Maybe not a top echelon guy, but still a guy that's pretty good. This is very he'd be receiver number 1 on a lot of teams in college football. But you're right. JJ McCarthy looked absolutely horrific in this game. The running game wasn't the best either for Michigan, especially against a not very good Maryland team. So one thing they've got going for them is the defense. Obviously one of the best in the country, definitely top 5 in my opinion. But I think I saw it on. I was listening to R.J. Young this week of Fox Network talk about how Michigan's finally bled. So they finally had a game where it was pretty competitive and they had a chance to lose. First time that's really happened all season because they had the Penn State game in the bag pretty much from the beginning. So maybe that's a good thing for them, or maybe it's not. Maybe it shows a crack in the foundation there or something like that for them. We know what they're going to want to do on offense from here on out. We know they're going to want to try and run the football up and down everybody's throats. But when the game is on the line and you have to make a 3rd down and 6 pass over the middle of the field, can JJ McCarthy do it? Can he be the one to really put this team on his shoulders? The more and more I watch him play, I'm starting to say no. But then again, I've said no for Kyle McCord as well. But the one thing Kyle McCord's got going for him that JJ McCarthy doesn't is Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'm kind of with you, and I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not so sure that I'm going to pick Michigan to beat Ohio State. Now, offensively, is a lot of their offensive struggles due to maybe not having Jim Harbaugh on the sideline? Possibly.
Maybe.
We'll never know because, I mean, there's no way to ever tell. But
or is it that they don't know the defensive plays coming now?
We'll never know. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. If Michigan loses to Ohio State, they are firmly out of the playoff conversation. So definitely an eye-opening game for them and the country. This Maryland game going into the Ohio State game. It's going to be a great game regardless, but definitely interesting to see what happens from here on out. But let's talk about why don't we move over to the ACC?
Okay.
I want to talk about Louisville and Miami. Louisville wins this game 38-31. Obviously, Miami was playing really well in the first half, but Louisville was able to come back in the second half and take the win. Obviously, putting themselves in the ACC championship game against Florida State. They're kind of the last hope for a team like Alabama now to get in the college football playoff, or a team like Texas. And I think, Jake, with that, don't get me wrong, Tate Rodemaker, pretty solid backup quarterback for Florida State. Not bad at all. Pretty solid guy. But Jordan Travis, and we've kind of hated on him a little bit this year. But I think he's a little bit better than a lot better than Tate Rodemaker in this offense. I think Louisville will get it done in a couple weeks. But just for the time being, we'll talk about Louisville, Miami. What a job Jeff Brom has done this year. I mean, he definitely has to be in consideration for one of the top coaches in college football. His first year at Louisville, Scott Satterfield just decides to leave that program, and then they end up a better program that because of him leaving, hiring Jeff Brom in the ACC championship game his first year. Granted, the ACC conference, not that great of a conference. Clemson's had a down year. Obviously, Miami hasn't been what everyone thought they would be. North Carolina's had a little bit of a down year, but Louisville, easy schedule coming into the year, but they've taken care of business, and that's all they can really do. Jack Plummer gets a lot of hate, but he's been a pretty solid quarterback for them coming over from Purdue with his head coach. And then obviously everything goes through Jawar Jordan on that offense, the running back there. So who knows? Louisville maybe can shock the country in a couple of weeks. I don't know if it'd be a huge shock to this program, but I mean, Louisville, big win against Miami on the road. Definitely shows the integrity of this team. They're a hard-nosed football team, and they're going to compete with anyone.
Yeah, this is just another one of those games. The audience doesn't know since our episode didn't get uploaded. Didn't want to record in the first place. But these are games that Miami doesn't win. I mean, Miami can hang there. Again, I'm going to reference it every single time. Miami and Texas A&M can compete with most teams in the country, but they don't win those games. So they're going to finish. I mean, what is Miami right now? They're 6-5.
Yeah.
They're not a great team. And the thing is, they played a really clean game. They didn't have many penalties. They won the turnover battle. Louisville had 1, they had 0, and they stayed in there yardage wise and everything. But I mean, you're not going to win this game just because you're Miami. I don't know if you need a new coach. I don't know if you just need new players. I'm not sure what it is. It's just how this program works. So I'm not surprised by the ending. I mean, Louisville was one of my best bets to cover and to win. So they did that. They survived. Jack Plummer had been sneakily really good this year for the Louisville Cardinals. I don't know how many years of eligibility he has left. Maybe he has next year too. I would assume he does.
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume he does. So maybe, hey, he can come back and they can be really good next year. Because right now, I guess they're a top 10 program. I think they're in my top 10. I think a lot of teams outside the top 10 would beat them, obviously. But I mean, they're 10-1. They have a chance. Who do they play? They play Kentucky. They got to go beat Kentucky. That'll be a tough game for them. Okay. Who's coming off a loss to South Carolina. But then, I mean, you have a chance to go spoil FSU seasons, and especially with a backup QB and Tate Rodemaker. And the thing, because I was watching Josh Payton, I really agree with him where if FSU does finish 13-0, I mean, this can kind of be into a transition and talk about that just real quick. But if FSU does finish 13-0, you have to put them into the playoff. I get it. You don't have Jordan Travis, your starting QB, but you can't take it into your own hands to decide if a team is way worse without that. Obviously, you can say they would be a better team with Jordan Travis. I 100% agree. But also, when Jordan Travis was in this game against North Alabama, not Abilene Christian. That's who A&M was playing. But when you're playing North Alabama and you're struggling really bad, it was 13-0 through almost the whole half with Jordan Travis. And then as soon as he goes out, that's when the team stepped up. That's when Tate Rodemaker did really good. So maybe he comes on and surprises them and he's better than Jordan Travis and he can help them. So no matter what, if FSU wins out, they have to be in the playoff, because it was like Ohio State in 2016, 2015, I think 15, when they won the national championship with Cardell Jones, their third string quarterback. I mean, in this day and age, everybody would have just wrote them off and said they shouldn't make the playoff because not only is their starting QB injured, their backup QB was injured. And so if FSU especially has to go in with a third string QB, they're going to say the exact same thing. So, I mean, they have a good enough team around them to potentially win a national championship. But it does make FSU a little bit worse. But Louisville has a chance to go into that ACC championship and upset them.
No, I completely agree with you and Josh. I think if they go 13-0, they definitely have to be in the playoff. But like we've been power rating all season, and I don't think they've been in my top 4 once all season. I don't think they're a top 4 team in college football. So let's say Alabama beats Georgia, Washington wins out. Obviously, the winner of the Michigan-Ohio State game's in, and then Florida State goes in as well. So you got your 4 teams right there. Obviously, those 4 teams are the most deserving teams to be in it, but I don't think they're the best team. I mean, I think Texas and Alabama both are better than Florida State. I think both of those teams are better than who else do we have that we
I mean, it's
I mean,
it's the,
so
it's the way the playoff works.
just the
You
way
have
it is.
it's a mix of putting in one, the most deserving, but two, also the best teams, because you can't take it into your own hands and say that a team deserves to get in, but they're not a top 4 team, because then the whole season doesn't matter. So I mean, because I can be as biased as I want to be, but if Georgia loses to Alabama, they're not in, and I don't think they should get in. But I mean, you cannot tell unless we get blown out by Bama. Obviously, we are a top 3 team in the country.
Yeah.
No, if we lose by 1, if we lose by 10, we are a top 3 team in the country. Unless we lose by 25, maybe I can be convinced we're not.
Yeah. And like I said,
But
Alabama, Georgia could be the
unless
national championship game,
barring complete chaos, Georgia is not going to get in if they lose that game.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's the way it works. I still think we deserve a top 4 bid. It's just the way college football is played out. There's just so many teams right now that can still get in, which is the beauty of it.
This has been one of those years where it's like I was never even a fan of the college football playoff. I've always been a BCS guy. I've always liked the BCS system the best. And especially once they made the playoff 4 teams, I never wanted to expand. But this season itself is a case study of maybe why the college football playoff should expand, because there are just so many quality teams this year. I mean, like you and I have talked about, there are legitimate 8, maybe even 9 teams, if you want to group Louisville into that category, that have playoff/national championship aspirations still to this day on rivalry weekend. That doesn't ever really happen. So, I mean, of any year, and then you've got a few teams outside that top 8 that I think could make some noise in the playoff, like Missouri or an Ole Miss. If they were in, or LSU is a perfect example, Kansas State. So, there's some teams that, I mean, this would be the perfect year for the 12-team playoff, like they're going to do starting next season. But yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be an interesting road these next couple of weeks to see who makes it. But obviously, let's go to the game of the weekend. Your Oregon Beavers were favored at home.
Crazy.
And it turns out the safety was what put them in for it. Washington wins 22-20 in Corvallis. I was able to watch this game. Yeah. And I'm telling you, it's kind of the narrative I've heard on every show, every college football review show that I've watched this week, is everyone keeps counting Washington out. And when they count them out, they come back and win. And what do we say? Good teams win when they're put in situations like that. And they have done it time and time again. So when are we going to learn our lesson and start saying, hey, Washington, maybe they are a top 4 team. Maybe they are better than Oregon. Maybe they should be competing with the top dogs. And obviously, looks like Oregon, unless Oregon State does something crazy next weekend, it looks like Oregon and Washington will be primed for a rematch in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks. But I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with Michael Penix. Obviously, dude, Rolo Dunze, he is a dog. He may be I think he is a top 3 receiver in the country. Obviously, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors are the number 1 and number 2, but he's definitely to me the 3rd best receiver in the country. I mean, he's had a really good season. Michael Penix is, getting the ball to him many different ways. Penix just stays so cool, calm, and collected and poised back in the pocket too when things go bad. The weather was tough in this game. Just brutal. I mean, freezing cold, and raining. Yeah. So Washington weathered the storm on the road, ended up winning in a pretty hostile environment there at Oregon State. So good for them. Good for Kalen DeBoer. They've got Wazoo next weekend. It could be a trap game there. Wazoo's 5-6 this year. They need a win to get into a bowl game. Obviously, we know what they were to start the season. They were pretty good. And you can't just look over them going into the Oregon game. So, could be a sandwich trap game for them next week. But, man, Washington's been impressive, and you can't keep counting them out. And I think that not only have you and I done that, but I think a lot of people throughout the country has done that this season.
See, I don't even think I've done that this year. Last week was the first time Oregon jumped Washington in my rankings. They were always 4 or 5 for me, but I don't get why. I did pick Oregon State. and Oregon State played how I expected them to. If you take away those interceptions, DJ, you had, or at least take away the fumble, I don't. Turnovers is always very variance, and so you can easily take away one or two. You can easily add one or two on the other side. You never know. You can never predict how that's going to go. But Oregon State played really well this game. They played tough, and again, you mentioned it. The cold weather, the monsoon, it was really hard to win this game, and Washington won. The penalties weren't going their way. The turnovers was the only thing going their way. So, I mean, props to them for winning. Again, good teams figure out how to win even when they're not supposed to. And destiny seemed like they were not going to win this game. Seemed like the Oregon State Beavers were going to come out and win. And Oregon State still has a really big game against Oregon that could spoil Oregon's season too, and then cause Arizona, which is crazy, which I want to talk about them next, but could cause Arizona to go to the Pac-12 championship.
Hot team. They are red fire.
Insane if that happened. But yeah, Michael Penix's not going to light up the scoreboard in this game because obviously how much it was raining. 13 for 28, 162, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he played well though. I mean, you said it. You were impressed. I was impressed too. I mean, he looked pretty good this game. I get the stats aren't there, but if you didn't watch this game, you have zero clue how it went. Because even DJU, I get it. 15 for 31, 164, no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I don't think he played a bad game either. But when you're playing in this type of weather, I mean, it's ridiculously hard. So I mean, this is a game that Oregon State, if you could tell me what the weather was going to be, I would have been more confident in it. Because Damian Martinez, I mentioned it, he's been really good all year. He had a really good game. And Oregon State has a really good ground game and a good defense. So, I mean, Washington won a game that you want to expect them to with their air raid offense. But yeah, I mentioned it, and you just said it, Arizona, red hot. They are arguably the hottest team in college football. With up there with Georgia and Alabama. Do I think they would compete against those teams? No, but I didn't think they were going to beat Oregon State. I didn't think they were going to beat Utah by how much did they win by? 40?
32 to 18.
30? Whatever that math is. 20 something. 24. Yeah, I didn't think they were going to beat Utah this bad. And they were up 21-0 in the blink of an eye. It was crazy. And so you mentioned it Jeff Brom, I mean, done a really great job at Louisville. Arizona has done it. Jed Fish at Arizona has done a tremendous job because Arizona 2 years ago, even last year, they were a really bad team. This year, we thought they were a bad team at the beginning when Mississippi State went to OT with them, when USC went to OT with them, when Washington only beat them by 7. But I mean, those are looking like quality wins for all those teams now, which is just crazy. And if they can rematch all those games, they might be 11-0. Because this team is surging. And so if Oregon State can go upset Oregon, I mean, Arizona can play spoiler for Washington too. So that's the key for Texas and Bama, or and Bama and Georgia, or just some combination of teams who we think won't get in. That's the key to them getting in by just Pac-12ing. Because if Oregon State and Arizona can pull off those upsets, which odds are one or both aren't going to happen. If they can do that, that'd be crazy. But Arizona has looked really good lately.
Yeah, I don't know what Washington would rather have happen. Would they rather just Oregon State beat Oregon so they could play a less talented Arizona team? But that Arizona team, like I said, red hot, one of the most red hot teams in the country. Or do you want to play a more talented Oregon that is, wants some revenge from what happened earlier in the season?
You would definitely rather play Arizona.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation though, because I mean, Arizona, they're one of the teams that, as a Bama fan, I'm sure as a Georgia fan, obviously, I think they would. I think your statement about them not competing, I think they would compete. Alabama, Georgia, what much better teams obviously should win the game, but I wouldn't want to play them right now. So, I mean, very impressive win against a really good defense. I mean, Noah Fafita, great game for him, obviously. So, yeah, this Arizona team would not surprise me if they end up representing a portion of the Pac-12 in that championship game. If Oregon State can, maybe pull off a shocking upset next weekend. But another game out west, UCLA beats USC 38-20. USC finishes 7-5. Never saw this coming. I mean, we knew the defense was going to have a lot of struggles this season. We knew that was going to happen. Obviously, Alex Grinch gets let go a couple weeks ago, But I just think the wrong coach in the LA area is on the chopping block. Because
100%.
Chip Kelly, I mean, yes, he may not be great with boosters. He may be a guy that likes to go sit in the corner and sit by himself and not talk to all these guys about NIL and the transfer portal and all that. But he absolutely outcoached and outmanned Lincoln Riley, who is thought of as one of the best coaches in the country. And as each year goes by, he's starting to slip further and further down my list just because he doesn't value defense, and the offense hasn't been good enough this year. With your former Heisman Trophy winner, hasn't been good enough. With 5 stars littered all over the offense, hasn't been able to sustain drives, score touchdowns. So obviously, Lincoln Riley probably is not on the hot seat. He's going to be back there next year, but if he continues to underperform with a really good offense and continue to not recruit defense, they're going to be in trouble. Obviously gave a lot of attention to USC right there, but let's not take anything away from UCLA. I mean, obviously we knew their offense was going to perform a little bit better than they have all season just because of how bad that USC defense is. But their defense really hung in there against that USC offense and played great against Caleb Williams. So hats off to that UCLA defense who's been good all season. Finishing the year on a high note for them. So good for those guys. They got another game and then obviously a bowl game. But we'll see what happens with Chip Kelly, especially after a big win like this. Maybe they retain him another year. But if I was Chip Kelly, I'd be pissed off that they were even thinking about firing me, and I'd go try and find a better job.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Not expecting 7-5. I could have foreseen them going 7-5. I didn't think they were going to lose to UCLA by 3 possessions at the end of the year. But this was the reason why I just went and looked at I keep track of all my top 25s. This is the reason why going into that Notre Dame game, they were undefeated. They were ranked 5, 6, whatever. I don't know. Everyone had them in their top 7. They were 14 for me. I mean, their defense has been bad. Their defense seemingly will always be bad. It's the reason why, exactly like you said, I get you have a really hard schedule towards the end. I mean, it was always backloaded. The front part of the schedule was ridiculously easy. You needed to blow out every single team. And then your last 6 games, you faced 4 ranked teams, and you ended up losing 5 out of 6, but still, I mean, you kind of got destroyed this game, in a game where you mentioned it, Chip Kelly on the hot seat. And I don't think he should. I think he's done a really good job at UCLA. And when you have a really, really good QB who's not playing right now because he hasn't played great, but Dante Moore, who's going to be really good, let him get his recruits in there and, let him prove himself. Where Lincoln Riley, you have the team. It's not that you don't have you have the best player in college football that everyone says is the best player in college football, Caleb Williams. I mean, he's a generational QB. I mean, but the problem, 1, it was defense, but 2, you look at the rushing statistics. They rush, including sacks, they rushed for 3 yards in total this game. They got destroyed. I mean, they're a better version of Colorado who has no defense, but also doesn't win in the trenches. It's the reason why they can't compete nationally. It's the reason why they don't win big games. It was the reason why Lincoln Riley wasn't the greatest at Oklahoma and couldn't win the big games. Because when you go and play Georgia in the Rose Bowl, you lose that game because you don't have the defense to win, or can't win in the trenches when you are obviously way more talented at the skill positions and at QB. I mean, it's the story of Lincoln Riley's life by now. And I mean, he's been this way for, I don't know how many years he's been coaching, 8, 9 years, whatever it is. I mean, he hasn't changed. I don't know if he will change. It has to. I mean, so we'll see how next year goes. We'll see who they hire for their DC. But I mean, next year, if he has another year like this, if he goes 8-4 or worse, maybe even 9-3, depending on what those 3 losses look like or his wins look like, I mean, he's got to be out of USC.
Yeah, well, how about we hand out some helmet stickers now, Jake? Terrioa McMillan is going to start it off for me. The wide receiver out of Arizona could have totally butchered his first name there, but really could have gone with Dylan Bell as well. Both receivers who had a receiving touchdown and a passing touchdown in their game. But for McMillan in general, I'm going to go 8 catches for 116 yards, 14.5 yards a catch, a touchdown, obviously receiving, and then a passing touchdown versus Utah. So obviously a really good game for him and the Arizona offense in general, putting up 42 against a really good Utah defense, and getting another big time win. Like you said, one of the hottest teams in the country. So good for McMillan and good for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I want to give my first one. Well, I want to give my honorable mention to Dylan Bell as well. Had a really good game. It was the Dylan Bell game in Knoxville. He had a breakout game and had a passing touchdown and a receiving touchdown and a rushing attempt. So he was doing it all. Debo Samuel out there. But I want to give it to the most underrated receiver, second most underrated receiver in college football behind Lad McConkey, Troy Franklin. And he's having a really, really good year. 68 receptions, 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's averaging 18 yards a catch. And then in his game, he had 8 receptions for 128 yards with 2 touchdowns. I get it. They were playing Arizona State, but he just does not get any love. All the love is going to, I mean, I get it. Luther Burden, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. Those are all first round picks. But I mean, Troy Franklin is doing it all as well. And so Keon Coleman is another one getting a bunch of hype. But I mean, Troy Franklin's up there with the best of them as well. So I just don't understand why he doesn't get any of the national media hype at all when he is the go-to receiver at Oregon, a potential playoff team. So we'll see how it plays out later on. But he was really good this weekend and has been really good the whole season.
Yeah, so for my second helmet sticker, I'm going to go ACC, and I'm going to go Brennan Armstrong, the quarterback at NC State. This is just, to me, an unreal stat line. 18 of 26 passing for 203 yards. So it doesn't jump out at the page for you right there. 7.8 per pass completion, but he had 2 touchdowns throwing the ball. He also had 21 carries for 89 yards as a quarterback, averaging 4.2 and a touchdown in a win against Virginia Tech, 35-28. So good for the Virginia transfer over there. He's had some struggles this year, including, I think, being benched at one point this year. But, I mean, to throw 26 passes and then carry the ball 21 times. So, I mean, 47 plays of your offense are running through Brennan Armstrong, through his arm or his legs. And it's a big ask for your quarterback. And he got it done. So congratulations to Armstrong and NC State on a big time win over Virginia Tech. I think they're now bowl eligible because of that win.
Yeah. And I'm going to give a shout out to my UTSA Roadrunners. I thought they were going to be really good coming into the year. I had them a hot take that they were going to be the best group of 5 team and make a New Year's Six bowl. They started out 1-3. Granted, they played Tennessee, so obviously they're not going to win that game. But I mean, they lost to Houston. And I think Army was the other team they lost. They were bad at the start. They've turned it around. After they started out 1-3, they've won 7 straight. They're now 8-3. They just beat South Florida, and they're playing Tulane in a really big group of 5 game this weekend. And they have a chance to. I mean, if they win that game, I think they're going to shoot up into my top 25, and they will probably be my number 1 group of 5 team, like I predicted them to be. But Frank Harris did it all against South Florida. He was 31 for 46 with 411 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 10 carries for 112 yards with 3 more touchdowns. So I had a Jaden Daniels-esque game where Jaden Daniels, it would have been a helmet sticker for either one of us, but they were playing Georgia State, and they really want him to win a Heisman because they had him out there in the 4th quarter when they were winning by 40, and he was still throwing bombs and running for 30 yards a carry. I mean, that was just wild. I mean, I get it. Georgia doesn't try to win Heismans, but I don't think I've ever seen that where you're blowing a team out and you want Jaden Daniels to win a Heisman that bad. I don't know.
He was responsible for 8 touchdowns in that game against Georgia State, and the school record is 8 in a singular game by Joe Burrow, and he had a chance to break it, and Brian Kelly took him out. So, don't really know.
Hey, shout out to Leak had a touchdown against LSU.
He started the scoring off. They were winning 7-0 thanks to his touchdown catch to start the game.
I didn't know that. I just saw it. Good for him.
Yeah, so good for him. But we'll go with my final helmet sticker, and that is the quarterback of the New Mexico State Cowboys, Diego Pavea. 19 of 28 for 201 yards, 7.2 average, 3 touchdowns against Auburn. He also had 8 carries for 35 yards. A big-time upset, their first win over an SEC team in school history. They're 1-27 against SEC teams in school history. Also got the bag. And, all the New Mexico State Cowboys players were talking about how they hope that money that they won beating or just playing Auburn ended up beating them and getting the bag and leaving Kings of Auburn, Alabama. They hope that money goes for NIL, and Diego Pavea might get a few bit of those Auburn dollars. So not only is Auburn paying a couple of head coaches, they're also paying New Mexico State's football players in NIL too. So good for the Cowboys, and hopefully Alabama can replicate what they did on the Plains this past weekend.
Yeah. And my last one is going out to one of the most underrated players in all of college football. I don't get why he doesn't get Heisman hype. He should definitely be in New York. I don't care how the game in Atlanta goes. Carson Beck has been absolutely surgical this year. And this is his first helmet sticker, but it's his second. I think I gave it to him after the Kentucky game, where again, it was absolutely amazing. But he was great this game. In his first, I don't want to say first true road start, because he played in Jordan Hare and won the game for us when he needed to. But this was raucous. Like I said, I mean, Tennessee might have beat the decibel record. I was told, I heard that, Tennessee players couldn't even hear a timeout called. I mean, it was loud there, and Carson Beck looked dialed in. He was cool, calm, collected, was 24 for 30 with 298 yards. Let's just say 300 yards with 3 touchdowns. And again, I'm really impressed with, he's not the most mobile quarterback ever, but when he sees grass, he goes. He had another 2 scrambled touchdowns on third downs, a 3rd and 6, and I believe a 3rd and 3. I mean, I'm just really impressed at what he does. He seemingly has every single answer they throw at him, no matter who it is. So he's the only first-year quarterback that has not had a bad game. I mean, every single game has been really good for him. So he's looked really good, and he's definitely deserving of this.
Yeah, well, something that didn't look good for either one of us was our best bets this week.
I will say it's not best bets, but it could have been worse. We were both 50%. So for me,
3 of 6 for both of us.
Yeah, for me, what hit, I had LSU minus 31.5, or sorry, just 31, I think. That was my lock of the week, so at least my lock of the week hit. But then Michigan minus 19, should have taken Maryland. I thought Michigan was going to look better. Nope. And then another game, I had Louisville plus, basically Louisville money line. You disagreed. You had Miami, but Louisville won that game. And then the 3 player props. This is why it was tough. I had Shadur Sanders in both of my 2 of my player props. He got hurt, I think, on the 3rd drive and didn't go back into the game. So I had him over 307.5 passing yards and 2.5 passing or rush touchdowns. He could have hit it. There's literally no way to tell. But I had him over in both of those, and those didn't hit. And then obviously got to go with Brock Bowers over. That was an absolute lock. He hit that. He only hit it by 5 yards, but still.
Yeah. Well, I actually got all 3 of my games wrong, and I got all 3 of my over-unders right. So for the over-unders, I had Illinois, Iowa under 30.5, and that hit. I had Colorado and Washington State over 63.5. Washington State almost hit that on their own. I think they scored 56. And then UCLA, USC, I had the under 65.5, and that hit. So over-unders, I'm looking pretty good there. But the games, pretty bad. Like you said, Michigan, I had Michigan covering the 19 against Maryland. That didn't happen. I thought Kansas State 7.5 would be a really good line.
You convinced me not to.
I know, because Kansas is playing a 3rd-string quarterback, and Kansas made it a good game. I think Kansas State ended up winning by 3 or 4 in the game. And then my lock of the week was Illinois, Iowa, a 3-point spread. Iowa won by 2, of course, 15-13. They couldn't freaking score another couple points. So I don't know if I'll be doing Iowa game bets anymore, but they still won the game, and they're looking to be 10-2 and representing the Big Ten West in the Big Ten championship game. So
gonna be the worst 10-2 team ever.
The week before I was 2 of 6. Now I'm 3 of 6. So I'm getting exponentially better. Yeah, just one step at a time. But we'll take it. We'll take a little 50% to push. We'll take it. So how about we do our top 25?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and lead it off with first time they're in my top 25 all year. I have A&M. They got bumped in there. And you know the reason why? Jimbo's fired now, so they have something to live for. They don't have a horrible coach that they're going to go home to. So they're definitely going to play with some life for the rest of the year. And like I said, they can compete with any of the top 25 teams. If Georgia went into Kyle Field, they would be probably like 7.5 point favorites, maybe 8.5. And it would be a close game. They can compete with anyone. They just don't go win those games. So, I mean, especially now that you don't have Jimbo and you can be a better team, you can maybe win some of these games. So, I mean, I think they've always been a good. It's a top 5 program we talked about. If not top 5, they're definitely top 10. They're a really good program. They have great players. It was just Jimbo was holding them back. Now that Jimbo's not holding them back, they can be in my top 25.
Yeah,
Oh, I forget we go for. I was waiting for you to go. Yeah. Also in my top 25 for the first time this season, NC State has looked really good lately, and then UCLA, they're 23. Liberty also in my top 25 for the first time. I don't think they would beat anybody in the top 25, but gotta show love to an undefeated Group of 5 team. And then Notre Dame 21.
I want to give a shout out real quick because I forgot to put UCLA in my top 25. I do have them in there now, but I had Toledo, the Toledo Rockets at 25. They're having a pretty good season for a Group of 5 team. They're just outside of 26, but down one spot from last week, coming in at 25. And this is strictly because they didn't cover the spread. I've got Iowa at 25.
Is Iowa in top 25?
Because they're going to be going to a Big Ten championship game, probably at 10-2. At 24th, I've got Clemson up from unranked. Another good win for them. Like Dabo said, start buying stock. Since he said that quote, they've won, I think, 3 games in a row now against 3 pretty solid opponents. So Clemson up from unranked to 24. UCLA up from unranked to 23 after a big win against USC. Up another spot to 22 is Tulane. And then right where I've had them, I think, for the last 4 weeks, I've got Liberty at 21. In the same spot. I think they're the best Group of 5 team this year in college football, and they will be taking on the New Mexico State Cowboys for a conference championship game. So looking to stay undefeated and probably represent the Group of 5 in the Fiesta Bowl if Liberty can continue their success from this season.
Yeah. At number 20, who dropped 3 spots, I got Tennessee. You got blown out by Georgia. Happens. Ole Miss happened to them the week before by worse. 19, I got Clemson. Like you said, looked really good. 18, my highest Group of 5 team, I got Tulane. Like I said, have a big game with UTSA. I might be watching that game. I don't know when it is or who else is playing at that time, but might be watching that one. That should be a good one. And then 17, I got Kansas State, found a way to win. And then 16, I got Oklahoma.
Yes, I actually had to make a few changes to mine because I forgot to. I had Utah up 2 spots after a big loss to Arizona, so I had to move them back to where they were currently. Utah's going to stay at 20 for me. At 19, down a spot, Tennessee, like you said, happens. 18, Notre Dame up 1 spot. At 17, I've got Louisville at the same spot. I just don't think they're a top 10 team. I don't think they're a good team, but they're not very talented. Kind of the same way for the way I think of Florida State. Very experienced team, not like just uber talented, but I love the coaching staff. Louisville is really making a lot with the less talent thanks to their really good coaching staff. And then down a spot at 16, I've got Oklahoma. Almost lost to BYU this past weekend. Was able to edge out that win towards the end there. Hopefully they're still alive for a Big 12 championship game berth and where they could possibly beat Texas for a second time this year. But they got to have Oklahoma State lose that game. Or Oklahoma State will represent part of the Big 12. But, yeah, I've got them coming in at 16.
15, I got Ole Miss. 14, I got Penn State. 13, Oregon State. Sadly, they dropped out of my top 10. 12, I got Louisville, where you had them at 17. 11, LSU.
Yeah, so for me at 15, down a spot, I've got Oregon State. Obviously, I thought they were going to beat Washington, but I still thought they played a pretty good game, have had a pretty good season, so I'm not going to bump them down too bad. But up 2 spots at 14, I've got Arizona. This is the highest they've been in my rankings all season. So go Wildcats, baby. But at 13, I've got Penn State staying the same. At 12, I've got Kansas State staying the same. And at 11, I've got LSU staying the same.
Our rankings are pretty much – I'm kind of surprised. Our rankings are pretty much all the same. The only thing is you have Kansas State 12. I have Kansas State 17. And you have Louisville 12. Louisville 17. I have Louisville 12. So if you just swap those, they're almost all correct outside of 1 or 2. That's kind of surprising, except for this one. Arizona is a top 10 team right now. Arizona is my number 10 team. They would beat a lot of these teams. I think they could potentially even beat LSU. I have them above them. If they go on a neutral site field, who knows with how bad that LSU defense is. Yeah, Arizona's playing extremely well and can compete. Like I do agree they would probably compete against Georgia and Alabama. But I mean, they could beat a lot of these top 25 teams. They've been doing that all year.
Yeah.
Number 9, I got Missouri. Found a way to win. 8, they dropped how many spots? 5 spots. Dropped FSU from 3 to 8. Just because, I mean, I will say like I said, it's not up to, if I was on the CFB committee, they're in my top 4. My power ratings, whatever we want to call these, I don't think they beat the 7 teams if they go on a neutral site field, but they would be deserving of a top 4 spot if they went out. We've talked about that though. Number 7, I got Texas. I don't think Texas looked all that great. I mean, you thought they were potentially going to lose to Iowa State. Iowa State's not a good team. I mean, I get it was a trap game. I get it. It's a spot where Texas would lose that game. It's a spot where Oklahoma would lose that game. That's just Big 12ing. But you should not lose that game when you obviously have the superior athletes. It shouldn't even be close with how bad Iowa State is. So, I mean, you found a way to win that game. It was pretty ugly, though. Washington, I got them at 6. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got Ole Miss at 10, staying in the same spot. I've got Missouri at 9, staying in the same spot. And I've had Florida State really at 8 for like the last 6 weeks. They're going to continue to stay at the same spot. I still think they could probably, they're obviously going to contend for the playoff, but I still think they could probably beat Missouri with the backup quarterback, Rodemaker. I just think from 8 to 9, there's a pretty solid gap. I mean, I think the top 8 teams are really not going anywhere. Who's in my top 8 will probably stay in there the rest of the season. Now, there could be some shifting, obviously, within that 8, but I think those are the solid 8 best teams in college football. Down a spot to number 7, I've got the Texas Longhorns. They were really in control the whole game against Iowa State. Obviously, I thought Iowa State had a chance, a trap game, like you said, but nothing. The box score wouldn't indicate that they were in control, but they kind of were. But still kind of an ugly game from them. And they're still trying to find their way now without Jonathan Brooks, their star running back. And then at number 6, up a spot, I've got Washington. Impressive win on the road against Oregon State. I think that deserves they deserve a lot of credit for that. So put them at number 6.
For the first time in my top 5, I got Bama at 5. I do think Bama would beat Michigan on a neutral site field right now, but I just want to see what Michigan does against Ohio State. So I'm going to keep Michigan up there. I do think they would lose to Bama. I have Oregon at 4. I think they would lose to Oregon. I have Oregon at 4 right now. They just look really good. Their offense looks really good. They're physical. I think they go in and beat Oregon State pretty convincingly. And I think they go in and reverse their only loss to Washington and beat them. And then I got Michigan at 3. Again, if I was true to what I'm saying, I think Michigan would be 6. I think Washington would also beat them right now. But I just want to see how they do against Ohio State, who's my number 2 team, who jumped both FSU and Michigan in this top 25. And then Georgia is still the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, for me at number 5, I've got Ohio State in the same spot. Really interested to see what happens this upcoming weekend against my number 4 team, Michigan, down 2 spots from number 2. And then up at number 3, I've got Oregon. And for the first time all season, this is the highest I've had Alabama. I've got them at 2nd in the country. I've got Georgia obviously at 1st. So that's why I'm saying, Jake, I think the SEC championship game obviously will not have national championship written beside it. But once the season is over and done with, I think that is going to be the best game of the season, the most competitive game of the season. And I think really, to me right now, those are the 2 best teams in college football. The 2 most complete teams who are peaking at the right time, who obviously both teams have the most talent in college football. It's different in the SEC, So I think it just means more. And I think that this year is another year where we can say that. And right now, it's the hottest Alabama's been all season. It's the hottest Georgia's been all season. We are set up for an amazing game in 2 weeks. Got my ticket already. Cannot wait to be there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll be at the Iron Bowl this upcoming Saturday. Obviously, a lot of Alabama fans want to talk about what ifs with the college football playoff right now. But I just keep reminding them, Alabama has got to take care of business against Auburn first. And that's got to happen. Yes. And then you got to take care of business against Georgia, because if you don't win either one of those games, all of this college football playoff talk is a moot point. So to me, obviously it comes down to this weekend against Auburn, big time game. But man, that SEC championship game looms large, and it's going to be a fun one. It is going to be a fun one. And let me tell you this. I have been to 4 SEC championship games in my life, Jake Osteen. Alabama's record in those 4 games?
Probably 4-0.
4-0. So I've only seen the Tide lose 2 times my entire life. This year against Texas and 2015 against Ole Miss. Both of those games are at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Never been to Atlanta and seen the Tide lose.
Good
So
for you. I've been to two. We lost to Bama in 2021. We beat LSU last year. Let's have a winning record for me as a student. Come on.
hey,
You got
Kirby
to.
is what, 1-4 against Nick Saban, 1-3, something like that. A lot
Yeah.
better than most coaches, though. He's got to win. So,
But also he's 1-1 since he like, or I guess you could count
I mean, he was
27.
in a national championship game in
But
2000,
like the
2007.
thing is, he just didn't have his recruits and everything. Since he's established himself, he's 1-1. So has a chance to reverse that and go positive in his last two games.
But to me, both of those teams by far the most dominant teams in college football. Not by far, but I definitely think if you put Alabama on a neutral field, I think Alabama beats anybody but Georgia right now. And I still think Alabama can beat Georgia, obviously.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, right now, these two teams are peaking. Jalen Milroe is an issue. Carson Beck is an issue. Playing like two of the best quarterbacks in college football right now. So,
Quarterback position is going to win that game, but we can talk about that later. Is there a world this time next week if Georgia wins by 3 and Bama wins by 50, do you jump Bama to number 1?
it would really have to take a considerably bad performance from Georgia against Georgia Tech. And I'm not, dissing Georgia Tech by anything. They have gotten considerably better under
They're
Brent.
good on offense.
They are a good offensive team.
They suck on defense, but they're good offense.
And Haynes King has been there and has had a great season this year. So yeah, if Alabama absolutely destroys Auburn and Jordan-Hare and Georgia struggles a little bit against Georgia Tech, I may move Alabama up to my number 1 spot. But I think obviously Georgia's going to be favored to win the game in the SEC championship. I think I saw a potential line right now that was like 4 points, 4.5, something like that. Man, that's a tough line. I mean, what a tough line. It's going to be win or lose. I know, speaking for myself, I'm going to have a great time regardless. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, you would have told me Alabama would be in this situation right now that they're in, and I'd have them ranked second. I would have said you're crazy, because I had him, I think, in my polls after the USF game. I think I had Alabama ranked like 14th. So they've jumped from that much in my poll already just from the way they played. If we got to beat Auburn, I'll be pissed if we don't beat Auburn. But anything more Jake Osteen is icing on the cake. And if we end up beating Georgia and we go to the college football playoff, great, fantastic, would love it. My senior year of college, would love it. But if we don't, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Obviously, this team is which is crazy to say, this is one of the worst teams Saban's had since he's been at Alabama, obviously besides the 07-08 team. But, I mean, legitimately, this team has been so much fun to watch their progression this year. And it would be so sweet if they were able to go to the college football playoff, especially after all the downers. They've talked so much trash about them all season. So,
I mean, I think they've turned into not one of the best teams, but a very fieldable team with 2 first-round corners, a first-round edge rusher, potential 2 first-round edge rushers. So, I mean, they've looked.
You don't just have that one star player that
I agree.
Huge impact guy that Alabama teams have had in the past. Like, you don't have a Devontae Smith, you don't have a Derrick Henry, you don't really have a Tua. So
I agree, but Georgia,
Nick Saban's winning a different way than he has in the past, which is fun to see an old coach like him morph with the times.
Exactly. Kirby Smart learned almost everything he knows from Nick Saban, but now Nick Saban's starting to learn from Kirby, where that's not the team you have to have. Kirby proved it by winning 2 natties with the teams you're describing. I mean, Kirby's had those teams the past 2 years that Bama has this year, where it's really good defensive players, first-round picks littered across the field. But on offense especially, there's not one guy you look to. That, I mean, is just either an X receiver that can go up and get it no matter what, or is a running back that can go in and get you 10 yards every single carry like Derrick Henry. So,
and speaking of Georgia, especially when you watch them on offense this year, I mean, what a different offensive looking team they are this year than they were last year. I mean, when Stetson was there, I think to me it is. To me, Carson Beck is a much better passer than Stetson. Obviously, Stetson did a lot of things with his legs. Now that looking back on it, did a lot of things with his legs that really opened up that Georgia offense. But man, just so lethal in the passing attack this year, where they really, I mean, they were a really good passing team when Stetson was here. But to me, there's just been so much more precision and accuracy and, protection of the ball in this year's Georgia offense. They don't have the running game they typically do. and they still have a
I
really
think
good
not.
running game. No,
I,
they don't have what they've had. They still have a really good running game, but the passing is what's different this year. So many weapons, so many different guys Carson Beck can choose, and obviously Carson Beck's a very good passer. So
I think their run game is better than it has been in the last 2 years. I think that's the best run game we've got. I mean, the O line's playing the best they have the last 3 years. Running backs,
O
I mean,
line can be a big contributor, but I mean in
yeah.
terms of just and that may be what you're talking about with just the O line being
No,
able
I'm talking about run
to.
game in general, running
But
backs.
I think in terms of like running back, we've seen many better running backs that Georgia's had in past than we do right now. Same with Alabama. Same with Alabama. So
I think I mean, well, we can end it here. I think Kendall and Dejan is one of the most underrated duo running backs in the country. But I think you're right. I mean, when you look at it, James Cook, Zamir White, that was better. Kenny McIntosh, along with Kendall and Dejan last year. I mean, whenever you lose Kenny, obviously, Kenny was really good for us. But I mean, that'll be it. We could talk about this. I mean,
we can
I
go on and on. You and I
after,
think that
after next week,
no,
after next
yeah, yeah. And that
check out.
championship Saturday preview show that we have where we're going to talk about all the different conference championship games. We may spend 30 minutes on the Alabama Georgia game for real.
We may spend more because there's going to be like 2 conference championships that really matter.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So, but yeah, hopefully we will have a preview show. And hopefully this show goes on air, assuming everything goes well with Zoom. But yeah, I'm back home in Georgia now, so I'm back on the East Coast time zone. It's 12:50 here, so I'm already back tired. I'm still getting used
Now
to.
you know how I feel.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to the hour ahead, and obviously after watching the NFL game. So still getting used to all that, but great show tonight, Jake. I really enjoyed talking with you. Like I said, I got the preview show later this week. Rivalry weekend already here. Can't believe we're already like past mid-November. I mean, just crazy how fast time's flown since we started our show literally like 4 months ago. So that'll do it for episode 28, guys. Thanks so much for watching, for liking, for subscribing. Make sure you do all those things if you haven't, and let people know about us. So with that, roll Tide.
Go Dogs.